Let's now take a look at the useRef hook in React. Now to understand this hook, we will go through an example to see when to use it and how to use the hook. In VS Code, we have created a custom component, and this custom component will help us go through one of the three scenarios that we're going to discuss in this video. In the first scenario in this custom component, we've essentially created a state variable that captures a click count. And in the JSX of the custom component, we just have a button that allows the user to click. And when the button is clicked, we invoke the handleClick function. In this function, we invoke the updater for the state variable, which will log a message to the console indicating how many times we've clicked the button, and provide a return value, which is the new value that we want to set the state variable to, which will be the previous count plus 1. As well, in the custom component, we log a message to the console indicating when the component in its entirety is rendered again. So now, if we were to hit save and head to the browser, what we will see is the button on the browser screen. Now, if we were to click the button, we will see that we get the message that we've clicked the button one time, but because the button changes the state variable of the functional component, it causes the functional component to re-render. Now, this is a little bit inefficient, and this is something that we would like to avoid if we can. So what we can do is we can actually use the useRef hook. useRef hook is providing the same functionality as a useState hook, which is providing a means to cache a value between component re-renders. But the difference is the useState hook causes the component to be rendered anytime it's changed. The useRef hook, on the other end, will not cause the component to re-render when it's changed. So now, if we were to use the useRef hook, let's see what would happen. To use the useRef hook, we will first import it from the library. And now to use the useRef hook, let's define a variable. We will say click count. And to use it, we essentially invoke the function useRef and provide a initial value. In this case, we'll provide the default value, or the initial value is 0. Now the difference between the state hook and the useRef hook is that the useRef hook provides in return an object which has a data element called current, capturing where in the object our cached value is. Whereas the useState hook provides two return values, one is the value and the other is the updater function. useRef hook just provides one return value, which is an object. So now, with that in mind, let's update our code. Now we will change the reference in the JSX, which is okay. Next, we will look at the reference in the handleClick function. Here, we no longer have the updater function. Instead, what we need to do is rewrite our code so that first we print the message to the console, which is going to be click count dot current plus 1, and then we need to update the actual cache value, which we can do by reassigning the current value in the click count object. And we can clean up our code. Now it's doing the same thing as we were doing with the state variable, except we're now dealing with an object instead of an updater function. Now let's save and head to the browser. What we will do is we will clear the console. And now if we were to just reload the page just for sanity's sake, clear the console again. And now if we were to click the button, we will see that we're able to update the cache values that captures that we click the button one time, but it has not caused the component to re-render. So that is the first scenario where we can use the useRef hook to store any cached values in our functional components, which should not trigger a re-render of the component when they change. So again, that's the first scenario. Now let's look at the second scenario. In the second example, we will look at the most common use case for the useRef hook, which is to link the useRef hook with a DOM element and perhaps use that to add focus to an input form element in response to a button event. Let's do an example to see how that would work. So what we will do is we will clean up the existing component. So we will first create the console.log message, and in the JSX, what we will do is we will create a fragment. The fragment will encapsulate the form that we will now look to create. In the form, we will have a label which captures the user's email through an input field. Now, instead of a click me for the button, we will say focus input. and clicking on this button should add focus to the input form element. Now for the input form element, we need to store the value in a state variable. So let's go ahead and define that. User email, and the updater function will say update user email, and it's by default initialized to a blank string. Now let's add the prop value for the input field, which will be the user email. Now we also need to define the event handler for the input field. So on change, what we will do is have a function which is handle email change, and we will define a function. So const handle email change, and this is going to be an arrow function which accepts the event, which is going to be a change event, which is of type HTML input element, and this is going to be an arrow function. In the arrow function, we're going to update the user email through the updater function, and this is going to be the e.target.value. So that will capture the change. Now in the button click, what we need to do is when the button is clicked, we need to trigger the input form element to add focus in the UI. So what we need to do is to use the useRef hook. So let's go ahead and add that. So what we will say is let input, we'll call it email input field equal useRef, and this will capture an HTML input element object as the value, and initially we will set it to null. Now to link this useRef data element that we just defined in the form, we can actually leverage the ref prop that's provided in the JSX from React, and by doing so we're able to assign the DOM element to the variable captured by the useRef hook at runtime. So what we will say is ref equals in email input field. Now to see what happens, what we will do is in the handle click, rather than adding focus, let's for a moment just add a console log which will capture the email input field, and we just want to see what is captured by the React library when we have written the link of the useRef hook to the ref prop in the input element. So we will go back to the browser, and what we will do is we will click the button, and we will see it captures the input object, which is the DOM object that we would have previously used a document query selector from JavaScript. So that's the advantage of using the useRef hook in this manner. Now what we want to do is, instead of doing a console.log, we want to add focus to the email input field. So email input field dot current, and is this not null? And if it isn't, what we will do is we will call the focus function, which is part of the JavaScript library. So now if we go back to the browser, if we click on ABC, everything works, but we've removed the focus from the input field. As you can see, there's no more blinking cursor. But if we click on the button focus input, the focus is added. So this is the second use case of the useRef hook in React. In the third example, we will explore another common use of the useRef hook, which is to store the previous value of the state variable. So let's take a look. In our form right now, we have the input field and the button. We will get rid of the button, and in the form, it will display a message to the user, which is the current email is, which is determined by the user email state variable, and the previous email is, which is going to be an expression which we will complete in a moment. Now we will clean up the handle click event handling function. We will clean up the old useRef variable. We'll define a new variable, let previous user email equal useRef, initialized to a blank string to begin with, and we will also clean up the ref prop in the JSX. Now to initialize the previous user email, we'll use the useEffect hook. The useEffect hook takes a function which will essentially set the previous user email dot current value to be equal to user email. and this useEffect hook is dependent on the user email state variable. So now what we will need to do is in the JSX add the expression, so previous user email dot current. Now if we were to save this code and now head to the browser, we'll clear the console. What we will see is the form. Now as we type in the first character, we will see the current email is A and the previous email is blank. If I type in another character B, the current email is AB and the previous email is A. So that is in effect another use case of the useRef hook to store the previous value of the state variable. So that is in a nutshell how we can use useRef in developing functional components in React.